Castilleja students. This is Mrs. Graysmark. I showed you how to make blondies, and now I'm going to show you how to make the chocolate chunk cookies that the kitchen makes. A chocolate chip or chocolate chunk recipe, they're the same recipe, it just has to do with what kind of chocolate you decide to put in it. It's a very basic recipe, and I'm going to go through the steps and the key points you want to pay attention to. So the first thing I want to talk about is making sure that you have your butter at room temperature. When you bake cookies, you do not want to melt your butter. You want it to be soft where it leaves a fingerprint easily when you touch it. I left this out for a couple of hours and let it get soft. With this type of a day where it's a little bit warm, it's going to get soft within a couple hours easily. If I forget to leave my butter out, you can put it in the microwave, but you have to be very, very careful. 15 seconds, 10 seconds is all you need in the microwave in order to soften your butter. But the best thing really is to remember to leave it out before you want to make cookies. The other thing, it's always a good idea to leave your eggs out the same amount of time. Eggs are better at room temperature when you're baking than cold out of the oven. They'll react a little bit different. Maybe change your recipe just a slight amount, so I would leave those out as well. So everything before you bake, you want to get everything out of the oven. The recipe we're going to put up on the screen as I go through these steps, and you'll want to get everything out and ready to go before you start baking. The first step is to preheat up your oven. I've turned my oven on. The temperature on the oven is 375 degrees. So I've got that warming up to 375. The next thing I do is I get my baking pans out. I use parchment paper. We use parchment paper in the kitchen. It makes the cleanup of baking pans very quick, and it doesn't make your baking pans messy. You don't need to use parchment paper. You can spray it with a canola spray, Pam spray, any type of nonstick. You can spray that on your pan. Sometimes that builds up on the pans. People don't like to use it, so I like to use parchment. You can use foil as well. If you have foil in your pantry, you can use foil. So get your pans. I have 2 pans ready because that's how I'm going to cycle them in and out of my oven. Step 1, you're going to measure out your dry ingredients. You measure and mix your dry ingredients when you make cookies before you start to mix your butter and your sugar together. So the first thing we need is 2 1/4 cups flour. I'm going to show you when you measure, you want to kind of have your flour nice and loose. I scoop it in so it's overflowing, and then I take a knife and I go across the top of my measuring spoon. 1 cup, and 2nd cup, I hope everybody's hanging in there at home. I think a batch of cookies for your family would be much appreciated. Every now and then is all right. Just have to be careful how often we do that. 1/4 cup right here. So that is 2 1/4 cups. The next thing you need is baking soda. I have grabbed baking powder, so let me switch that to baking soda. This is my baking soda. So baking soda, it's 1 teaspoon. You can scoop that out. With baking soda, the other reason why sometimes somebody's baking soda might be a little chunky, so that's another reason why you want to put it in the pan. Give it a little bit of mix before you put that in. It's also a teaspoon of salt. That's what I have right here. I use kosher salt. That's what I bake with. So I'm going to give that all a little stir. That is my dry ingredients. Ready to go. Now, whenever you're baking, you cream cookies. You cream the butter and the sugar together. And when you go, if you have like a KitchenAid mixer like this, you're going to have attachments. So this is called a paddle attachment, and this is a whisk attachment. When you're making cookies, you want to use a paddle attachment. This is what you're going to use to cream your butter and sugar. You're not going to use your whisk attachment. So I'm going to put that aside. The whisk you're going to use if you're whipping up egg whites or you're whipping cream. But anytime you're baking and mixing, you use this paddle attachment. So the recipe calls for 2 sticks of butter. And I explained to you earlier that that butter you're gonna want at room temperature. So you're gonna leave that out ahead of time. So 1 stick. And here is my 2nd stick. That is my butter. Put that aside. The next thing you do, when you make chocolate chip cookies, most of the time, unless you want to change the texture of your cookie, some people like a crispier cookie. Some people like a more cookie that's a little more doughy. That will be affected by your ratio of sugar quite often. It's 2 things. It's the baking soda. If you're going to use baking soda and baking powder, that'll change your texture. The other thing that'll change your texture is the amount of flour and the ratio of sugars. But traditional cookies are a 50 to 50, same ratio of white sugar and brown sugar. So I have in this nifty measuring cup 3/4 cup of brown sugar. When you measure brown sugar, you always want to pack it down. So I push it in, and then I use this because it fits in there just perfect, and push it down. So it's solidly packed. You don't want it loosely packed. You want it solidly packed when we're talking about brown sugar. So that is 3/4 cup. I have this great measuring thing which allows me to kind of push out the ingredients, which I really like. And then white sugar. I'm going to fill the same thing up with white sugar. This is what people will refer to granulated sugar. You can't use powdered sugar in this recipe. It won't work. You want what they say is granulated sugar. All right. So that's up to the top, and my white sugar. So I'm going to go ahead and cream this together. All right, welcome back. We have creamed our butter and our sugar together. I want to give you an idea about what that looks like. This is what it looks like when it's all creamed together. So I'm going to give the sides one more scrape down and a quick mix. Just as an extra. Sometimes mixers don't get all the way down into the bottom. Some are better at that than others. And so I like to give it a nice mix, a little scrape down, and an extra mix. All right, we're going to give it a little more mix. So now you want to add your eggs. You're going to add 2 eggs. You're going to add them one at a time. I think it's always safer to crack your eggs into something before you add them, just in case there's you make a mistake and you get shells. So I crack an egg, put it in there, give it a mix. While that's mixing, I'll crack my 2nd egg. Turn it off, we'll add the 2nd egg. Alright, I'm going to take a minute. I'm going to scrape down the sides, make sure everything's really incorporated. You can do this without a mixer, as I might have said before. It just takes longer. The mixer really speeds up the process. But if you use one of these nifty spatulas, you can mix it all by hand. Alright, I'm going to add a teaspoon of vanilla next. That's the final wet ingredient that's going to go in there. So we'll add 1 teaspoon. Just a basic Trader Joe's vanilla. I'm going to give that a mix. I'll incorporate it. Alright, we are ready for our dry ingredients. The way I add the dry ingredients is usually in 3 portions. I'm going to do about 3 large scoops, and I'm going to mix it on low. Give it a mix. If you put it on too high, it's going to splash back at you. So just start out low, give it a little mix. Once it looks like it's incorporated, you can add the next batch. That was super quick. 1, 2. All right, last but not least, I'm going to go ahead and just pour the rest in. There we go. Start slow. There you go. All right, it is all mixed together. We are going to add the chocolate now. I have a cup of chocolate chips here, which I had already had, and a little bit of a chocolate bar. If you want a chocolate chunk cookie, excuse me, you want to take a chocolate bar like this, and you want to chop it up, just like this. Chocolate chunk is real nice. A chocolate bar does not often have the same preservatives that chocolate chips have in it. Chocolate chips are made to keep a certain shape, and so they have fillers and preservatives in there to help them keep the shape. If you want to cut up a chocolate bar, and make like what we have at school, chocolate chunk, it makes for a really nice cookie. I'm going to do a bit of a hybrid because I just want to use what's in my pantry. I don't want to have to go trying to have less shopping trips. So be creative. If you have white chocolate chips in your pantry, you can use that. I use semi-sweet. You can use milk chocolate, semi-sweet, dark chocolate, whatever your preference is and whatever you have. So it's 1 cup and 3/4 cups of the chocolate. Goes in next. If you want to add nuts, you can at this point. Walnuts go very nice in this recipe, and so do pecans. So you'll want to chop those up. Just put them on a board and give them a little chop before you add them. And if you want to add nuts, it's typically about a cup, 3/4 to a cup of nuts, and you'd add them at this point. I'm not going to add nuts. I'm going to give some of these to my brother, and he is allergic, so I'm going to leave nuts out. And let me give this a mix. And that's all it takes. You can do this last step by hand if you want. I just do it by the mixer because it's super, super quick. All right. Take this off, and then we'll scoop them on and start to bake them. So the baking time on these cookies is 9 to 11 minutes. I tend to go on the 11-minute side. You can go on the 9-minute if you like your cookies a little bit more on the doughy side. I tend to like my cookies a little more baked. Let me grab my cookie sheet. Here's the cookie sheet. All right. I use the scoop. You don't need to use a scoop. You could just use a tablespoon. If you want to just use a tablespoon, it just goes like that, and just kind of shape it into a little bit of a ball. So either one works. I like the scoop. It goes a lot faster. You gotta give them room to spread out. I'm going to show you in just 1 minute. Once I put this in the oven, I actually have a batch that's already been cooking. So I can show you how much they're going to spread out so you know how far apart to put them. But as you can see, super quick, super easy recipe. Stick these in the oven. I'm going to set my watch for 10 minutes. And I'm going to check them in 10 minutes. I'm going to show you these that just came out of the oven. So as you can see, I tend to like mine a little bit more brown, and they cooked up nicely. They're going to spread out a little bit, as you can see, and I hope you enjoy them. I hope your family enjoys them, and I hope we're back in the kitchen cooking them for you very, very soon.